Welcome to the Lawyers Talk Show on TASC TV, the voice of the Turkish American community. I am the host, attorney Erol Gulistan, and our guest today is Mr. Aslan T, a New Jersey attorney who is experienced and has a 26-year career as an attorney, and he's achieved success in his career. And he's had both a positive impact on thousands of Turkish American and Muslim American lives in America. His contributions will help generations of Turkish Americans and Muslim Americans to come. Thank you for being on the show, Mr. T.Soobzokov, and it's an honor to have you on the show.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Mr. T.Soobzokov, where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in Paterson, New Jersey.
And what was it like growing up in Paterson, New Jersey?
Well, it was not an easy walk. It was pretty difficult for safety reasons. It was in a very depressed area in Paterson, and you had a lot of people who would hang around the school and cause trouble. But I was fortunate enough to use my wits and my street sense to avoid major problems there.
And during which years were you describing that upbringing that you had in Paterson, New Jersey?
Roughly. I was born in 1957. I went to Eastside in 1971, Eastside High School in Paterson, and I graduated in 1975.
Mm-hmm. And Paterson's gone through quite a change. From what I understand, back in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, it was a different demographic. But then after the, I believe it was the riots in the late 60s that caused a big change in terms of the population in urban city centers in New Jersey. So thank you for that. And Mr. T.Soobzokov, what inspired you to become an attorney?
Well, a very close family member of mine, my father, he was involved in some problems with the United States government for which he was not responsible for. And I saw how he was treated by the justice system in the United States. I didn't want anyone else in my family or myself to ever go through a legal problem and not have anyone to support you. We had difficulty retaining lawyers because of our low income at the time, and through finances and through sincerity. The lawyers, a lot of them, I'm sorry to say, especially at a particular level, are they have no empathy. They just go through the motions. But in the end of the day, we had a lawsuit against the federal government after their attempts to prosecute my father failed. We sued them, and there was a resolution, a settlement to the case. So those factors, seeing my father suffer in the United States while I was growing up, fighting the U.S. government, it created a incentive for me to become a lawyer so I could protect those around me and those who are, friends of mine. But that's pretty much the response I have to that question.
Thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit about your law practices, what areas of law you practice, and perhaps some memorable cases you've had over your 26 plus years in practice as an attorney?
A memorable case? I think the most memorable case was a Karashai man who was convicted of a crime. He served his time in jail, and the proceedings were initiated to deport him because he was not a naturalized citizen. And I filed documents to get him released from prison after he finished his prison term. He was literally just lying in the jails in New York, and fortunately, we've made the application to the court and got him released under special provisions in the INS code, where they cannot keep you in custody for a certain period of time without taking any further action. Once I filed the papers, he was released. He was originally from Turkey, I think. And, he was just thankful to me, and I was thankful to Allah for helping me be able to release this man from custody. And alhamdulillah, it happened.
And did you have any, just out of curiosity, did you have any cases involving any detainees either at Guantanamo or any other detainees post 9/11? Any stories on that you can speak about?
Yes, Mr. Gulistan. There was, after 9/11, the United States government arrested numerous people who either had green cards or had visit visas in the United States who were working here to support their families overseas. And can you give me that question again, please? I don't know if I'm giving you the right answer.
Yeah, well, it's after 9/11, a lot of Muslims were detained, and a lot of times they were detained without any sort of charges.
Correct.
So the question is, as a legal practitioner, somebody who was practicing law during that time period of 9/11 and shortly thereafter, did you have any any interactions or any stories that you'd like to share about either any detainees or anybody that was held up or wrongfully detained?
Yes, there was many young Turkish men and other Muslims who were arrested, and they were held without charges. They were not given any bail, and they were left to rot in the jail. When I found out about this, I filed a petition for habeas corpus in the federal court for this one particular Turkish gentleman and some other people. And again, thanks to God, I was able to get them released from custody, and they were sent back to the country, while other people who did not have attorneys lay in the jail for months upon months until either they retained counsel or for some other reason they were released. But there were many grown men who I was speaking to who did not understand why in America to be placed in custody for something they had nothing to do with. And they were mistreated by, of course, even some people in the jail because they were Muslims. And 9/11, of course, they say was the result of some activity taken by Osama bin Laden and his group. But again, we were able to, having grown men cry in front of you who are strong men and asking, why am I in jail? Please get me out, send me back to my country. And we were instrumental in that. And I had kept those files beyond the 7-year retention period, some of them anyway, just to remember what these people went through and what I had to go through to get them out of jail. I did all these cases for free because they were Muslims, they were suffering, and I figured Allah granted me the ability to have a license, and I have to do what I can to help. And I always promised Allah, if He helped me succeed in becoming an attorney, I would always help those Muslims who are in dire need without cost.
God bless you, and thank you for that.
My pleasure, brother.
So I'm going to read a selection of Death and Exile, the ethnic cleansing of Ottoman Muslims between 1821 to 1922 by Professor Justin McCarthy. And I'm going to have a follow-up question right after. Despite its weakness, the Ottoman Empire did not constrict or collapse from internal revolution. Whether it would have collapsed from such internal pressures as the desire for political reform or unaided nationalism of its peoples may be an interesting speculation, but the empire was in fact destroyed in international wars with militarily superior foes, primarily Russia. The same wars decided the fate of the Muslim peoples of the empire. Their suffering was attendant upon attacks on the empire and invasion of their homelands. In some areas, such as eastern Anatolia during the First World War, many Muslim deaths were the result of intercommunal conflicts, but those too occurred as part of an international war. Russian expansion began in the 14th century when the Russians recovered native rule from the overlordship of the Golden Horde. By the end of the 15th century, Russian Tsar Ivan III ruled over a kingdom freed from Muslim sovereignty. Then the process of subjugation reversed. Ivan the Terrible began the conquest of lands north of the Black Sea, in which the population was predominantly Muslim and Turkish speaking. During his reign and for 100 years afterwards, wars with the Turkish speaking Crimean Tatars and other Muslims continued. The wars were vicious, led by raiders on both sides. Like the earlier, somewhat similar wars of expansion in Spain, self-serving leaders and unstable alliances between Christians and Muslims played a part, and sides were not always clearly drawn. Yet in the end, the Muslims were defeated. By the reign of Peter the Great, Tatar rule had been reduced to a small region consisting of the Crimea and its immediate hinterlands. Under Peter and his successors, Russian expansion to the south continued. Perforce, the expansion was at the expense of Muslim rulers, and the conquest was the conquest of Muslim peoples. The difficulties inherent in this conquest were perhaps more evident to the Russians than they might have been to others. For 2 centuries, the Russians had been under the rule of a people who were religiously and ethnically separate from the population they ruled. Eventually, they succeeded in overthrowing what was viewed as alien rule. The Tsars were now undertaking a similar conquest of alien peoples and might ultimately expect the same sort of uprising against the alien rulers themselves. The method adopted by the Russians to ensure they would not suffer the same fate as the Golden Horde was effective, if ruthless. They denuded the areas they conquered of Muslims and replaced them with Christians. This was not a policy unique to Russians. At the time, as the Russian actions against Muslims, for example, European settlers in North America were imposing a similar policy on the Native Americans. That being said, the policies that the Russians were imposing upon the Muslim population was the same policies that the European settlers in North America were imposing on the Native Americans. So the question that I have is, do you think Muslims and Native Americans were dehumanized? And are they still being dehumanized by many in Western cultures today?
No, that's for sure. I'm a Circassian. Turkish call Circassians Cherkess. I'm a Cherkess, and my mother and father were born in Kafkas, and our family has been there for since we could remember. And the Russians literally took over Cherkess lands in Kafkas and went further. Went into the Karashay area. They went into the Chechen area, the Dagestani area, and they controlled the complete lands that we had and lived on as free people for centuries. The impact of that I find myself when I go to Kafkas to see my relatives there, I see that there's always a sense of despair. You know, I mean, they're nice and they're happy with you and all that, but they're in a sense of despair because they're discriminated against in Russia. Even though the war we had with the Russians that dated back to 1864, when we succumbed to the Russian rule, it has never been the same for our people. And of course, if you look a little bit more in the eastern part of Russia, we have many Muslim republics there, which also are suffering the same fate today. They are not given employment opportunities. They're limited in their educational opportunities because it is said to me by them that the government and the institutions there all support I wouldn't want to use the word extinction, but the ability of our people to never rise again. And it seems that the actions taken by the communists, or even the Russians today, you don't want to call them communism, maybe they're not communists now, maybe today to some extent, but what they have done to our people and to other peoples of our religion is something that is not really known in the American society. So they probably, they did what they did to the Indians, which Native Americans, which of course was a true tragedy. similar to the Holocaust, which is a big tragedy. And no one's held accountable. And we see Indians, Native Americans today living on reservations where they're living off government handouts, which must be a particularly difficult thing for them when they literally controlled the whole country at one time.
Right. And the events that you were describing internationally, in many circles, it's referred to as a Circassian genocide. And in fact, 1.5 million Circassians, about 75% of the population from the homeland of Circassia, were driven from the population. And the Ottoman Empire opened up its doors, and the Circassian population was essentially given two choices. One was, I believe, they could either go to undesirable parts of the Russian Empire at that time, which would have been Siberia or some far part of the empire, or it was the forced expulsion to Ottoman Empire. So they really didn't have much of a choice, considering that there was an ongoing genocide and there was a systematic, mass murder, ethnic cleansing, forced migration, expulsion, and things like that. It's not very easy to deal with. And in fact, today, only one country in the world has recognized the Circassian genocide, and as of today, and that's Georgia. So I would hope that more awareness is made so that there can be recognition by more governmental entities. So the question that I have on this, because in Western society you have genocides that get recognized, and then you have genocides that are not recognized. And I'm beginning to notice that a lot of the genocides that are not recognized, that the victims are overwhelmingly Muslim. So the question that I have is there a double standard that applies to Muslims in society today?
I would say, without any question of doubt, there is mistreatment of Muslims in America, and I think it will continue to be that way because of all the propaganda that is prevalent in America, that Muslims are disfavored. They don't feel that they're trustworthy, and they're literally afraid of them. The way they dress, they find that to be sort of inclusive, and they feel that we're not open with them as they're open with others. And of course, we have reasons for being reluctant to be totally Americanized, if you will. But the conquerors are the ones who end up controlling everything. As far as the Circassians go, as you mentioned, we were victims of a horrible genocide since prior to 1864, when we lost our freedom in Russia. And after our people were defeated, they were, of course, mistreated by the Russian conquerors. And as you said, the Ottomans, they led the Circassians into Turkey. And as of today, or in recent modern history, the most Circassian people can be found in Turkey. And they are overall, as I understand, good citizens. They contribute to the welfare of the country, and they feel an affinity with Turkish people. And of course, in Kafkas today, the genocide has resulted in less than 1 million people remaining in Kafkas, Cherkess people living in Kafkas. They either emigrated overseas if they were able to, or they went to Turkey. Sometimes you find some colonies in the Middle East, Jordan, Syria, and whatnot. So we're a displaced people. And it's sad in the sense that generation upon generation, the parents, the elders, try to make the younger people feel what the reality is. But once they come into America, somehow they become less nationalistic than they were years ago.
Yes. And, continuing with that, the history of the expansion of the Russian Empire and the creation of new nations in the Balkans and the Caucasus has traditionally been told from the standpoint of Christian nations that were carved from the Ottoman Empire. However, Turks and Muslims suffered death and exile as a result of imperialism in the form of ethnic cleansing and genocide. What was the Russian Empire's goal in committing ethnic cleansing and genocide in the Caucasus, Balkans, and former Soviet Union?
No, I think that the goal is complete domination of all the territories within their borders, even though those territories were inhabited by indigenous people. I get always stuck on that term. But somehow the people survived, and they go on and on. We have a yearly commemoration on May 21st of every year in the Caucasus, in Turkey, in the Middle East, where Circassians reside, where we protested against the genocide. And we're permitted to do that in the Muslim countries without any ramification, although we're stared down by the Russians when we have these get-togethers. I was in Kafkaz on May 21st a few years ago, and I participated in a silent demonstration through the villages as in opposition to what Russia was doing.
Yes, and thank you for that. Now, will genocides, ethnic cleansing, and other crimes against humanity committed against Muslims ever be recognized more than just on the surface or beyond just mere words?
I think so, but I don't think when it's recognized, I don't think people will have the same feelings as we did, because time has passed, and like I said, the younger people, especially in America, young Circassian people in America, they are appearing to forget their native language. Some of them don't have we're not educated on the proper way of behaving within our customs. So that's becoming a problem that is on the forefront of our agenda for living comfortably in the United States, that everyone speaks their native language.
Yes, and and that's a part of that's important. So moving on to the next question. Mr. Soobzokov, social justice can take on different meanings to different people. What does social justice mean to you today?
Well, I mean, it's lacking, social justice. They talk about privilege, that the average American white is entitled to certain privileges that other people are not having. And I think it all comes from the fact that they were never really, even today, not looked at as first-class citizens. If you believe otherwise, you're fooling yourself.
Right. Now, I have a few troubling accounts that I've heard from clients in recent weeks, recent months, and in years. And it goes back to an unsavory situation in the city of Paterson Police Department. It's been said that for many decades, the city of Paterson Police Department has been having some difficulties with corruption. And it's been speculated and discussed that it's perhaps one of the most corrupt police departments in the country for decades. And this is a situation that's persisted. I've spoken to numerous retired Paterson police officers of various ranks, and according to their estimates, something along the lines of 80 to 90% of Paterson police officers are engaged in some sort of impropriety, according to these officers that I've spoken with. And everybody's experience could be different. In one story, a retired Paterson police department officer described to me how an arrest was made back in the late 90s of a drug dealer during a raid on a drug house in a busy part of Paterson. With the suspect fleeing on foot, the officer took his baton like a baseball bat and waited for the drug dealer to turn the corner. According to the officer's own account, he hit the suspect so hard with the baton in the head, as if he was swinging a baseball bat, that the suspect did a flip backwards And there were about half a dozen Patterson Police Department officers, all retired, during the telling of the story. And it made for a punchline, where they all laughed and mocked how badly they beat the suspect, how badly he was injured. And they were joking around saying, "Oh, what are you, a trapeze artist or something?" In that sort of language. And also calling him an acrobat. Also, FBI has arrested 8 officers in Patterson in recent years as part of an ongoing corruption investigation. There's also some rumors of some other impropriety that I won't get into the details of. Now, is Patterson Police Department as corrupt as some of the former police officers have claimed? Or is that just a perception?
I think it's a negative perception. It is an improper belief that they are all corrupt, or the majority of them are corrupt. There were those officers that you mentioned who were arrested. They all pled guilty. And I think they all, or most of them, who did not cooperate with the FBI, they fell victim to custodial sentences. And every so often you hear about bad apples come out of a police department in different parts of the country, but that's not reflective of the whole police department. I know people from the police department, and they have their own way of conducting their work. They have a lot of limitations on them, but it is foreseeable that some of these officers who wear a badge and a gun tend to become, their head becomes inflated, and they think that to some extent they're above the law. I understand that, but I cannot paint, in fairness, I cannot say that the entire police department is corrupt or they're involved in some type of illegality. I cannot accept that premise, and from what I know about the police, it's not that way. You have bad apples, and when they're bad, they're really bad, as you can see.
Yes. And how does Patterson, Police Department shake off that sort of perception? Because there's a lot of these stories coming forward. I mean, I think I just had a client last week who came in and said, he got arrested by a Patterson police officer for something misdemeanor a number of years ago. The officer emptied out his wallet, took all the cash out, and told him to leave on foot. Stories like that just seem to keep coming out, though. How do we defeat this perception, or how do we make sure that the intent matches, the actions uniformly?
Yeah, how can we do it? I think the best way to respond to that is that there have been incidents where was that violence by the police, they call it police brutality, and those cities where they have that same problem, what they did is they had more community outreach. The police would walk on foot patrol, and they would engage with the people of the city to gain the trust of the people, and maintain open dialogue with them. Patterson, I think they're trying that as a sort of a program, but I don't think it has any formal implementation at this time.
And hopefully we can implement that, because I know it's badly needed in the community.
Sure.
So moving on to the next topic. Currently, there are no Turkish Americans elected to any state legislature and none elected to U.S. Congress at the moment. When will Turkish Americans have a representative voice in America? Do you think it'll start once there's an elected state legislature official or elected congressman or congresswoman?
I think that the problem we have with that is that if people from the base of the Turkish presence in the United States and New Jersey, the more people who come into the country and who live in the same general geographical area would vote for someone who's familiar to the Turkish people. I know there hasn't been any elected yet, but if you look at the Palestinians, they've been here in America for quite some time, and locally in the Passaic County area, in northern New Jersey, also there are some, a few, I think quite a few of local areas that this could be a good thing. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. So, right now, moving on to the next topic, how important are morals in a healthy society, and what are the most important morals for citizens to have?
Well, I think morals are imperative. I personally, don't give much credence to people who don't have any morals. Morals mean to me to be honest, to tell the truth, to avoid engaging in any criminal conduct, and be kind to your neighbor. I think these type of morals, of course, in our deen, of course, we should pray also. That would help us to be more obedient and more peaceful in our way of thinking and our way of life.
Yes. And getting to, government function, can our government function more effectively for the people while also having our corporate citizens' voices heard, as vibrant as it is today?
Can you repeat that?
Can our government function more effectively for the people while also having our corporate citizens' voices heard?
Yeah, that's a conflict that's been ongoing in this capitalist society for quite some time. It's difficult because they both have different standards within themselves. Can there be improvement? When money is involved, it's always a problem because a lot of people are driven by money. So whatever they could do to get money, some of them would just literally break the law, but we need to somehow maybe have equal opportunity, more of it in this country, and maybe that will alleviate the problems that we're having with the corporate environment.
Yes. Do you think too much money is being spent on political campaigns?
Absolutely. It's a shame. Maybe in this past election, I don't recall exactly, but it was somewhere in the area of about $12 to $15 million each campaign spent to try to get into the White House. And if you take that money and dedicate that money to removing the homeless people in our society, it would be a very, very good thing. But it's not a priority to those who are, to use a lack of a better term, entitled.
Yes.
So I think that's where the problem lies, and it's not an easy thing to conquer because again, money is I call it the shaitan, the money, but the money drives people to do many, many bad things.
And, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, taxpayer money and how it's being spent, because it doesn't seem like taxpayer money here in the U.S. is being spent wisely at all. I take a look at, some countries in Europe and, all across the world, there's countries that are investing in, different things, more so for the benefit of their citizens. Hopefully at some point in the U.S., we can have more of that investment here within our own communities versus those tax dollars being sent out to, some, whether it's a corporate interest or whatever it may be. So I hope that one day that can happen here in the United States.
So it would be a beautiful thing if that could happen, yes.
It certainly would. Now, in your opinion, what do you think is the most uplifting thing happening in the world right now?
Maybe I'm being somewhat pessimistic, but I don't see anything of substance that you're referring to that I could explain in this interview. I can't respond to that question in any depth.
Okay. What do you think is the most tragic thing happening in the world right now?
I think the most tragic thing that's happening in the world is obviously the COVID. And another thing that I really am troubled by is the the way the poor are treated in every country in the world. They are considered to be maybe third-class citizens, and the efforts that they have to pull the people out of poverty are limited, because you have a lot of special interest groups in the United States that influence the lawmakers, and these people are wealthy. They contribute to campaigns, so they're the ones who are preventing us from being a much better society, because their drive is money.
So do you think perhaps that maybe the campaign contribution limits can be adjusted to make the playing field a little bit more even?
Well, I think the people who that would affect will oppose that, because again, they have their own vested interests, and they don't care or feel for the poor. I think the immigrants who come to this country understand that better than those who are true Native American, well, not only Indians, but Americans who are born and raised in this country.
Yes. So, transitioning to the next question, can people with vastly different cultural backgrounds live together peacefully, and how?
Well, I mean, we can live that way, but we have to be dedicated to adopt the norms of this country. And you and I, I'm sure we could say we've been through different struggles, and we felt prejudice even in our roles as attorneys. But I really don't see that ending. I think that there'll always be a separate classes in this country, and for them to reach out to help those in need is not always promising.
Yes. And thank you for your honesty on that.
Sure.
What are the most important factors in maintaining a well-functioning society, and what does it mean for a society to function well?
Everybody got to be treated equal. If people aren't treated equal, you don't have a peaceful society. You always have resistance. I think that there are a lot of programs on paper that are never implemented that could alleviate all those things. But again, you have that clash between the classes, and usually the ones with the money are the ones that usually pull out victorious.
So it's a matter of rule of law, you're saying. If there's rule of law, then societies function well. If there's no rule of law, then the societies don't function as well.
That's true. There's no doubt about that, Erol.
And how important is science in the world we live in today?
Science. Finally, we have landed on the moon with a vehicle, and it's traveling around the Mars, rather not the moon, Mars, and it was a big, significant, I think, thing for us that we finally placed a remote vehicle on the Mars, which will go throughout the area and taking photo samples, and sending that information back to mission control. I don't know if that is what you were looking for as far as a response.
Yes. It's definitely crucial. Without science, we wouldn't have a lot of the technological innovation that we do have in the world. So you're absolutely right about that. Now, what does honor mean to you, and how important is it to you?
It's something I live by. Once a man or a person, woman, once they lose their honor, they find themselves difficult to find respect from members of their community and members of society. So it's important that we continue to look for ways to find a meeting of the minds, so there's no other obstructions to achieving that goal.
Yes. And would you say people have an obligation to help others, or should people be responsible for helping themselves?
No, we always have to help each other. Allah always finds people who have abundance and those who don't have anything. And I think it's very important to have empathy for those people who are poor, have no place to go, and who don't know where they come from. That's one of the most difficult things to except where people don't know their lineage. In America, it's rare that you find a continuous family, generation after generation, living in this country and supporting each other, family-wise anyway.
Yes. And what does being successful as a Muslim American in America look like?
Well,
how would you define success for a Muslim?
Well, it's right in front of you right now, Mr. Gulistan. If you look at all the physicians who are working or were working on a COVID vaccine, they're all either Muslims or Asians who are the ones who are putting this the vaccine together and to keep the country safe. So I think that we have a large role in the world as Muslim Americans, or Muslims in general. And unfortunately, the governments we live under don't always agree with what our objectives are.
Yes. And what advice can you give Turkish Americans and Muslim Americans who want to enter either law and government or politics? 'Cause I'm sure there's some young folks, watching this who may be thinking about entering either field of law, government, or politics. What can you say to them? What advice can you give them, Turkish Americans and Muslim Americans?
Well, I would say that the most important thing is education. You should educate yourself as much as possible. I think that that's essential. I think you should never forget where you come from and who you are, and you should follow the principles of the religion to avoid problems.
Yes. And with that being said, one of the major themes of the show is how we can improve the world for the greater good of humanity for generations to come. How we can leave it better than we found it for the next generation. What can we do? What can we do to have a better world for the next generation?
Well, I'm sure if you or I were involved, we would do a good job of that. But all I could say is to have for the people to progress, they must work hard, be dedicated to what they're studying. And I think with that approach, if our people were that way, we are successful now, I think, to a great extent all over the world collectively. But I think that if we focus on education, discipline, maturity, I think that we will achieve that end.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for coming on the show. Before we conclude, I ask our audience to think about a famous quote by former Bosnian statesman Alija Izetbegović on March 1st. Today is Bosnia's Independence Day. So also happy Independence Day to Bosnia. I believe that the people, instead of pretty lies, should be told the truth, no matter how ugly it may be. What can we do? Destiny hasn't been kind to us, but with the help of God, we will prevail. Thank you for watching the show, and see you next time.
It was my pleasure being here, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It was a great honor having you on the show.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.